You're listening to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where dice hit the floor, paint gets spilled, and no game ever goes exactly as planned. I'm Grizzly, and here we dive headfirst into Warhammer, tabletop gaming, and the beautiful mess that is the hobby life. From epic crits to absolute disasters, we'll cover it all. So grab your minis, roll with me, and let's get reckless. Welcome back to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where we dive into the lore, hobby, and the heart of Warhammer at Age of Sigmar. I'm your host, Grizzly, and in our last lore episode, we explored the Soul Wars, and Nagash's bid to seize control over every soul in existence. But today, we're picking up right where that story left off, and explaining how his ambition nearly tore the mortal realms apart. It all began with the Great Black Pyramid, an immense arcane engine built at the heart of Hysh, the realm of death. Nagash's plan was simple, at least in his mind. Harness the ley line network that connects all realms and redirect every dying soul into his domain. If it worked, death would rule forever. But Hysh is a hungry realm, and the power flowing through it was far greater than the necromancer had anticipated. As the ritual neared completion, the ley line energy began to overload, and that's when the Skaven made their move. Acting on behalf of the Great Horned Rat, newly ascended to godhood, they burrowed beneath the pyramid and tampered with its wards. They unleashed the raw warpstone energy into the spell's core, corrupting it beyond control. When Nagash triggered his ritual, it didn't channel death magic neatly into his control, it detonated it. That explosion is what we now call the Necroquake, a cataclysmic surge of death energy that ripped through every realm. Entire continents shifted, storms of magic erupted, and the laws of reality themselves were rewritten. The skies darkened. The winds howled with the voices of the dead from the chaos, and the spells were born, living manifestations of raw, uncontrolled sorcery. But the Necroquake did more than twist the fabric of magic. It changed the balance of power forever. It created the Hysh Nadir, a pit of concentrated death energy at the heart of Nagash's realm, and gave rise to new horrors and new armies. From that pit, a new empire began to stir, disciplined, unyielding, and built entirely from the bones of the fallen. This is where our story begins, in the aftermath of the Necroquake, as the mortal realms struggle to recover and new forces emerge from the darkness, the Ossiarch Bonereapers. In this episode, we'll explore how the rise reshaped Death's dominion, how the gods of order and chaos reacted, and how those events led to one of the most transformative eras in all of Age of Sigmar, the Broken Realms. So grab your dice, pour yourself a drink, and settle in, because today we're walking through the ashes of the Soul Wars and into the Broken Realms. When the Necroquake ended, it left the mortal realms in ruins. Magic howled across the skies like a living storm. Realms cracked and twisted, and from the depths of Hysh, something new began to take shape. For most, it was an age of fear and uncertainty, but for Nagash, it was an opportunity. While others fought to survive the aftermath, he was already rebuilding in his own image. Deep within the Hysh Nadir, Nagash began forging what he believed would be his perfect legacy, a civilization of death that would never decay, never rebel, and never forget its purpose. The result was the birth of the Ossiarch Bonereapers, undead constructs sculpted from the bones of the countless mortals and infused with fragments of their souls, warriors, artisans, tacticians, philosophers, all fused together into beings of flawless discipline. Each Ossiarch wasn't just a soldier. It was a composite of hundreds of lives, shaped into an instrument of absolute order. To the Ossiarch, undead wasn't damnation. It was structure. They believed in law, hierarchy, and the endless cycle of service to Nagash. Their cities rose as pale citadels of bone and black marble, anchored by the titanic Bone-Tithe nexus that fueled their war engines and linked them to their god. Their empire spread quickly, not as a horde, but as a machine, organized, deliberate, and terrifyingly efficient. But Nagash's perfect empire still needed a mind to lead it, a general worthy of his vision. That general was already waiting, imprisoned and forgotten. Long before the Soul Wars, during the Age of Chaos, there lived a man named Katakros, a mortal general whose brilliance on the battlefield was unmatched. Even in life, he embodied order and precision, treating warfare as both art and science. When he fell defending his homeland, Nagash claimed his soul, and raised him as the Mortarch of the Necropolis, the supreme commander of Death's armies. For centuries, Katakros led campaign after campaign, bringing an entire realm under Nagash's dominion. But his ambition and power made him a threat to Sigmar's fledgling order. When the God King's armies rose to challenge death, Katakros was defeated and entombed within one of the Stormvaults. Ancient prisons, designed to contain beings too dangerous to destroy, there he lay for ages, sealed behind walls of Sigmarite, his empire reduced to dust, his name fading into myth. Then came the Necroquake. The shockwave tore across reality, unraveling wards and shattering seals, and the Stormvaults were not spared. Deep beneath the mortal realms, Katakros' prison cracked open. He emerged into a world he barely recognized, one ravaged by magic, scarred by war, and ripe for conquest. His first act was not vengeance or fury, but reconstruction. He gathered the remains of his death-scattered legion, built new armies of bones of the fallen, and established the foundations of his new empire, the Ossiarch Bonereapers. Where the Night Haunt were chaos and terror, the Bonereapers were control and inevitability. They didn't pillage, they taxed. When their armies arrived at a city, they presented terms. Pay your bone-tithe, or be added to it. To some, that cold logic was almost merciful. To others, it was worse than annihilation. Either way, resistance was short-lived, and soon, the dead were building the next fortress for their own conqueror. Under Katakros' command, the Ossiarch legions pushed forward. From Hysh into other realms, their crowning campaign came when they turned their gaze upon the 8 Points, the black heart of chaos itself. Katakros' invasion was as audacious as it was calculated. He sought to dethrone Archaon the Everchosen and claim the realm gate nexus that connects all the worlds. The siege that followed was one of the greatest wars of the post-Soul War era. Bone and discipline versus iron and fury. For a time, it looked like death might triumph. Katakros established footholds, his Bone-Tithe nexus spread across the 8 Points, and the armies of chaos began to falter. But Archaon would not yield his throne, and with the Dark Aid of Be'lakor, the first demon prince, the Everchosen, struck back. Katakros' legions were shattered. His advance halted, and yet, even in defeat, the Ossiarch Bonereapers endured. They withdrew in order to rebuild their stronghold and prepared to begin again. That's what makes them so terrifying. They do not tire, they do not waver, and they do not forget. The Bone-Tithe never ends. Even in Nagash's physical form, a later fall in battle, his empire endured through these relentless, unfeeling soldiers. In many ways, the rise of the Ossiarch Bonereapers marked the true turning point between the Soul Wars and the Broken Realms. The moment when death became a nation, not a plague. And the mortal realms would never look at undeath the same way again. In the wake of the Necroquake, as death's magic settled like storm clouds across the mortal realms, the gods of order began to fracture. Sigmar's alliances, once united against chaos, were starting to crumble under the weight of pride, ambition, and fear. But among them, no one played the long game like Morathi, the High Oracle O'Kane, Queen of Deceit, Mistress of Shadow, and the most cunning survivor of the mortal realms have ever known. Morathi had always walked the edge between godhood and damnation. During the Age of Chaos, she escaped Slaaneish's grasp, but not unscathed. The Dark Prince devoured her once body and soul, and what emerged was something twisted, something that was neither fully mortal nor divine. That trauma shaped her into what she became, a manipulator who trusted no god but herself. She ruled her cult, the Daughters of Cain, in the name of her long-dead god, claiming to speak with his voice even though the god of murder was gone, just an echo trapped within her soul. But Morathi wasn't content to play prophet forever. She wanted to be the god she pretended to serve. After the Necroquake, when the mortal realms buckled under the wild magic, Morathi saw her opportunity. She worked her way into Sigmar's inner circle, playing the part of a loyal ally, all while weaving her own web of deceit. Beneath the free city of Anvilgard, in the realm of fire, her agents quietly spread through the city's ruling class. Spies, assassins, and priestesses, positioning themselves like pieces on a board. Anvilgard routed down from within, and Morathi was the rot's beating heart. There, she uncovered something the forces of chaos had hidden. Fahrenite, a living metal of pure corruption, harvested from the forages of Archaon himself. It was the blood of the dark gods, a substance used to create demons and gods alike. And Morathi realized that if chaos could create gods, so could she. Her great ritual began, a deception so massive it fooled even her most devoted followers. Thousands were sacrificed as Morathi attempted to fuse herself with the divine essence of Cain. The ritual tore through reality. Her body split. Shadow and blood pouring from her like liquid flame. From that storm emerged two beings, the monstrous Shadow Queen, serpentine and vengeful, and Morathi Cain, goddess of ambition and cruelty made flesh. She had done it. She had stolen godhood. The cost was Anvilgard itself. The free city burned as Morathi's army swept through its like streets, claiming its people as sacrifices. By dawn, Anvilgard was gone, reborn as Har-Kuran, the city of shadow, a monument to her triumph. For the mortals of the mortal realms, it was tragedy. For Morathi, this was ascension. Sigmar's fury was immediate. His Stormcast, once symbols of unity, now found themselves battling mortals that they had sworn to protect. His fragile alliance shattered. Morathi's betrayal didn't just elevate her, it fractured the entire Order pantheon. A single act of divine treachery set the tone for the broken realms to come. Gods no longer working together, but against one another. And personally, this has always been one of my favorite arcs in Age of Sigmar's lore. Morathi isn't just a villain, she's a survivor. Everything she does comes from that original wound, being devoured, humiliated, and left broken by gods she once trusted. There's something both horrifying and admirable about how she takes that pain and turns it into power. She refuses to stay beneath anyone, mortal or divine, and that's what makes her so dangerous. She's not fighting for justice or faith, she's fighting to never be powerless again. With her ascension complete and her new city rising in shadow, Morathi claimed her throne among the gods, but her rise didn't mark the beginning of Broken Realms. It signaled the end of the Age of Order, because while Morathi ruled through deceit and ambition, another god was preparing to reshape the realms through light and judgment. A war between gods was about to begin, and the first strike would come from Teclis. While Morathi rose in shadow, another god prepared to strike in the light. Teclis, the mage god of Hysh, had watched the events of the Soul Wars with growing disgust. To him, Nagash's dominion over death wasn't balance, it was tyranny. The Necroquake had twisted magic itself, spreading undeath like a plague, and Teclis saw it as an affront to the very principles of creation. He had warned Sigmar that Nagash's pride would doom the world, and when those warnings went unanswered, Teclis decided to act. In Broken Realms Teclis, his story begins not in Hysh, but in Hysh, the realms of light. There, Teclis had rebuilt an empire of his own, the Lumineth Realm Lords, shining exemplars of perfection. To them, every movement, every spell, every act was art. Their discipline bordered on devotion, and their devotion bordered on obsession. But even Teclis' radiant empire was not untouched by the Necroquake. The surges of death magic had seeped into every ley line, tainting even the purest of aether. To Teclis, that corruption was a stain he could not abide. He vowed to cleanse it, no matter the cost. So he gathered his armies, the gleaming host of Hysh, bolstered by the Seraphon and Stormcast allies, and marched into the heart of the realm of death. His campaign wasn't of conquest, it was of exorcism. Teclis intended to burn the rot out of existence, and humbled Nagash once and for all. Across the desolate plains of Hysh, the Ossiarch Bonereapers, led by Katakros, met the forces of Hysh in a confrontation of pure order against pure perfection. Bone and marble collided beneath the skies, lit by a river of spectral energy. Every clash like that of the toll of a cosmic clock. But above that battle, two gods met in open war. Teclis, the bringer of light, and Nagash, the great necromancer. Their duel was not of swords, but of wills, and the realms themselves were their weapons. Nagash commanded the power of every soul that had ever died, drawing on the endless well of Shaish Nadir. Teclis answered with the light of 1,000 suns, weaving runes of pure Hyshian radiance that blinded even angels. The air itself screamed. Mortals who had witnessed their clash were vaporized, their souls torn free by the backlash. For a moment, it was said that even Sigmar looked down from Azir and did nothing. When the storm cleared, Teclis unleashed his final act, a spell that would become the legend, the Light of Hysh. It was not a beam or a blast, but a wave of absolute illumination that erased the shadow itself. It struck Nagash at the heart of his empire, shattering his corporal form and scattering his essence across the underworlds. The great necromancer was undone. His body dissolved into dust, his will fractured like glass. The soul wars were over. But victory came at a price. Teclis did not simply destroy Nagash. It destabilized the very fabric of undeath. The surge of light seared through Hysh's underworlds, purifying some and annihilating others. Countless souls were cast adrift, untethered from their afterlives. Ghosts screamed through the skies as the veil between life and death flickered like a dying flame. Across the realms, necromantic magic spasmed. Corpses rose without command, endless spells spun out of control, and the mortis engines that powered Nagash's empire overloaded, imploded with brilliant death. Even the living felt it. In Ghyran, the waters turned gray for a day, and then bloomed into impossible colors. In Shamon, the winds of metal howled with voices. The realms themselves reeled, as if death of God had left a wound across the creation. Teclis called it victory. He declared the soul wars had ended, the infection of pure death cleansed, and the balance restored. But others saw the truth. His purification had simply replaced one imbalance with another. The world had been blinded by his light, and where light burns too brightly, shadow always returns. The Ossiarch Bonereapers endured, their discipline unbroken. Even without Nagash's direct will, Katakros became the de facto ruler of Death's Legion, maintaining order in the silence that followed. But the Night Haunt, the restless spirits of Nagash's making, went mad. Without his control, their grief and hatred spread like wildfire, haunting every corner of the realms. The god of death was gone, but his curse remained. Personally, I love this moment in lore, because it's such a powerful statement about the gods of order. Teclis truly believed he was saving the mortal realms, but his arrogance nearly destroyed them instead. It mirrors Nagash's perfectly. Two gods on opposite sides of the spectrum, both so obsessed with control that they bring ruin in their wake. It's poetic in a way. The light of Hysh and the darkness of Hysh canceling each other out, leaving only chaos behind. And as that chaos spread, the balance of power across the mortal realms began to shift once again. The skies darkened, storms overshadowed rolled across the Azir, and whispers began to echo from the void. The gods of order had torn each other apart. Death was in disarray, and now chaos was ready to strike. The next act in the Broken Realms was about to begin, and it's heralded by Be'lakor, the first demon prince. And that's where we'll leave things for today. From the ashes of the Soul Wars to the rise of new gods, the mortal realms have never been more fractured, and we're more alive. And we've watched Morathi claim godhood through deceit, Teclis bring light so bright it burned the god of death himself, and the world has shifted once again. And we've only just begun to see the fallout. In the next episode, we'll be diving into the Broken Realms Be'lakor and the Demon Prince who saw his chance to counterstrike while the gods of order and death tore each other apart. We'll talk about the cursed skies, the realm gates shrouded in shadow, and the rise of Chaos's first true empire since Archaon. And of course, we'll finish it off with the cataclysm that brought ages of beasts roaring to life, the return of Kragnos. Before we wrap things up, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who's been listening, subscribing, and sharing the podcast. The Rolling Recklessly community has grown so much, and seeing all the engagement from hobby updates to lore discussion genuinely means the world to me. So whether you're here for painting, building, or just vibing with the story of the Mortal Realms, I'm glad you're here. And if you want to keep that conversation going, join the Rolling Recklessly Discord. We've got channels for hobby progress, lore discussion, and local event plans. You can also follow me at Instagram at rolling_recklessly_podcast for episode drops, artwork, and Warhammer updates from our local scene here at the J&J Gaming Factory. Next episode, we step into the shadows with Be'lakor and watch the skies fall. Until then, may your crits be high, your paint never dry, and your rolls ever reckless.